Welcome to the new expansion, Murder at Castle Nathria. The theme of the set is Denathrius, the host, invites 10 guests, which are the class legendaries, to his party, his castle. Oh no, Denathrius is dead. It's a dinner murder mystery, and we have to figure out who done it. And let's start with a very exciting card, which might actually break the game, and I am serious here. It is the card that is being given out for free now to anyone who logs on. Prince Renethal. 3 mana, 3/4. Your deck size and starting health are 40. Now, if you've been playing in the first day of this card being out, you have seen people run Prince Renethal decks. The Renethal deck, or the 40 card deck, is probably going to be a deck archetype, where you're going to have decks that have the best cards, and then you're going to have a subsection of those decks, which are going to be Renethal, or 40 card versions of the decks, where you have the advantage where you start off at 40 health, you have the slight disadvantage that your overall deck quality got a little bit worse, just like Reno decks. It's really powerful to start with a maximum health of 40. If you consider 10 health gain to be worth 1 card and 3 mana, then you basically start the game off with like a 1 card advantage and a 3 mana advantage. Of course, the mana is only used specifically for gaining more health, which isn't as useful. But the point is this is a start of game effect, and start of game effects have been known to break the game. And I have a suspicion that Renethal actually has a chance at breaking the game. It's late 2022. The meta has devolved into Renethal Kazakusan Warrior mirror matchups, where the goal of the game is to obviously have a 40 card deck, run out your 40 card deck, and then play Kazaku-san so that you get another 10 cards in your deck. Now, there have been interviews with the dev team over at Hearthstone where they had to do a lot of testing here, and I'm sure they did. This could be the tipping point which makes control decks just kill aggro decks much more consistently. Now, the only saving grace here is that there are OTK combo decks that do destroy control decks, and then there are aggro decks that potentially kill the combo decks real good. If the Renethal deck just makes the control matchup stronger against aggro, and that means you have a healthy rock, paper, scissors format there. Now, there is the potential problem that Control Warrior might be able to gain enough armor to outlast the OTK deck, so we'll have to see. But Renethal, very, very cool design card, assumed that it's designed and balanced properly. The free-to-play Warlock deck is absolutely destroyed, by the way. When the deck size is plus 10, that free-to-play deck is just completely demolished. I got destroyed with this card coming into the format. Suffice it to say, Renethal is a really, really big deal, and this is probably the most impactful single card that they are releasing early. Should change things up a lot, as it already is. Let's go up next to the protagonist of this story. It's Murloc Holmes. 3 mana, 3/4 Murloc, Battlecry. Solve 3 clues about your opponent's cards to get copies of them. You're solving a mystery in each game, and you are going to have to take notes. The first thing you're going to need to take a lot of notes about is your opponent's mulligan. Did they mulligan any cards? And you have to pay really particular attention to which cards they play from the left side of their hand. Because the first question that Murloc Holmes will ask you, the first clue you must solve, is what card started in your opponent's hand? Now, if your opponent has literally played the card that started as the first 3 cards of their hand, then you know the answer. You should be able to have a pretty educated guess regardless. And I personally had to rate the probability chances of me guessing the question correct to be able to rate Murloc Holmes. I think that on average you have about a 90% chance of answering the first clue correctly. Question number 2. What card is currently in the opponent's hand? you'll have pretty good guesses about what cards couldn't possibly be in your opponent's hand because, you know, they aren't even in the archetype. But maybe you get 2 cards that are like very plausibly in the opponent's deck, and then it's really hard to figure out which one's in the opponent's hand. You could kind of narrow it down by using context clues. I rate the chances of getting the card in the opponent's hand like only at about 60%. So that's probably the hardest part. If you get the first clue and the second clue correctly, then you'll be presented with the third clue, which is what card is in the opponent's deck. This may seem like a slam dunk because deck lists for the most popular deck should be pretty obvious. You just pick one that's in their archetype. The snag in this is that the card might not be in the opponent's deck. It might be in the opponent's hand. I'm going to say you have about a 90% chance of guessing the third one as well, with most of the misses being, oh, the card's not actually in the deck, it just happened to be in the opponent's hand. Now, if you multiply those guess percentages correctly, 90% times 90% times 60%, you end up about 50-50 to be able to get all 3 clues correct. If you do get all 3 clues correct, you get the massive benefit that you get all 3 of the cards that you selected. So that's a 3-mana 3/4 Battlecry generate 3 cards. Now, because I only think people are going to have about a 50-50 chance of getting the 3 clues correct, that means on average, when you play this card, the 3-mana 3/4 generate 1.5 cards, with pretty significant variance because you're either getting 3 or 0. A very cool, flavorful card, and if you're a high roller, then I could see putting Murloc Holmes in a value-oriented deck. It's one of those reasonable filler cards. Not necessarily better than the Treasure Guard. The Treasure Guard will always get you a card from your deck and has also a good stat line. Yeah, Priest of the Deceased, a fun nod to Priest of the Feast of the Past. 2-mana 2/3 taunt with Infuse 3. Gain +2/+2 infuses a new mechanic in the set. Infuse upgrades after X friendly minions die, in this case after 3 friendly minions die while this is in your hand, then you have a 2-mana 4/5 with taunt. That's obviously really good if you can pull that off. Priest of the Deceased is thus meant to be played in a aggressive deck, a zoo type deck, a token type deck. Whether or not this card has any chance of being good depends on how good cards are that generate like extra tokens. Infuse 3 seems like a very high number, but the payoff is pretty good, 2-mana 4/5. Let's go to another one of the mechanics of the set, which are locations. The flavor of this set is that the murder occurred at a location by one of the guests. I would imagine that there's going to be one location for each class. So over in Warrior, the location is going to be Sanguine Depths. That's 1 mana to play the location out. Then the location says deal 1 damage to a minion and give it +1 attack. It's got 3 durability. The way that the location works is you play it onto the board, it takes up a board slot, minions can't interact with it because it has no attack, it has no health, you can't attack with it, and it has 3 uses, and you can use one of these uses each turn. You don't have to use them in subsequent turns, so you could use this on turn 1, and then turn 4, and then turn 10, or you could go like turn 2, 3, 4. This location obviously fits the theme that Warrior is getting, which you can see with Decimator Olgra. By the way, this is Mancrick's wife. We're in the Shadowlands, so Olgra's wife is dead, and apparently she's super powerful. 6 mana 3/7 legendary Battlecry. Gain +1/+1 for each damaged minion, then attack all enemies. Enemy includes the opponent's face, by the way. It seemed like if there were just 2 damaged minions out there, which can be yours, could be the opponent's minions as well, then it's a 6 mana 5/9, which immediately attacks the opponent's face and all the opponent's minions. Now, it's in a random order, so you don't know if she'll run into a minion and die before hitting the opponent's face, but at a buff 5/9, she might just run over the entire enemy line there. This card obviously synergizes with the location because while Sanguine Depths is out, you can easily use it to deal a few points of damage to the opponent's minions. Might be yours, might be theirs, and then you play the Decimator Olgra, and then you do a bunch of damage, and you kill the opponent's board, and then you hit the opponent for a lot, and it's all very good. I imagine that the warrior class set is going to have a few cards that like self-damage, you know, and Sanguine Depths would probably be really good with that mechanic. Decimator Olgra is similar. If you have a set of cards in warrior that wants your stuff to be damaged, then Decimator Olgra can be big a lot more often. Remains to be seen because we have to see the other warrior class cards. Let's take a look at the shaman theme. The location is going to be Muck Pools, which is 1 mana, can transform a friendly minion into one that costs 1 more, and it gets 3 uses. That's really strong. It's like Unstable Evolution 3 times, admittedly over 3 turns, but it only costs 1 mana. So we're gonna have to see the entire shaman pool. The thing that we're really wanting to see is there good effects for the mana cost. So basically we're looking for low statted minions which have really good battle cry effects for stuff that copies more of itself and then evolve them into something greater. Muck Pools also goes really well with the legendary for the shaman, Baroness Vashj. 4 mana 3/6 Naga. If this would transform into a minion, summon that minion instead. So you play the Baroness Vashj while you have the Muck Pools out, and then you get the 4 mana 3/6, and on top of that you get a full 5-drop. And all it took was 1 out of the 3 charges of Muck Pools. So that seems really strong. Really good start to evolve Shaman, which I'm sure is going to be an archetype that's pushed in this set. Because there's even a Primordial Wave here for good measure. 3 mana. Transform enemy minions into ones that cost 1 less, and friendly minions into ones that cost 1 more. It's a mix of devolve and evolve. Primordial Wave does have an advantage as it adds devolve and evolve into 1 card together. You're basically getting the effects of 2 cards for the price of 1. On the downside, the reason why evolve was good is because you wanted to play a cheap card that made copies of itself, and then you play evolve to bump all of those cards up a slot into real cards, but it's much harder to combo that with a 3-cost card. Also, the main reason you want to devolve is to get rid of the opponent's taunts and then attack face, but if you Primordial Wave, then your minions can't attack because they have summoning sickness after evolving while you devolve the opponent's board. So this is kind of in an awkward slot where I find it very, very difficult to imagine how this card would actually see real play. Suspicious Usher is a flavor win card. You got a Priest 1 mana 1/3, Battle Cry, discover a legendary minion. If your opponent guesses your choice, they get a copy. So the optimist in me, before like everyone says this card sucks, the optimist in me says this is a 1 mana 1/3, discover a legendary minion. And then, you know, ignore the other text there. Obviously, if you were able to out-level your opponent and get the card, then 1 mana 1/3 generated card is really good, given that they only have a 1 in 3 chance of selecting the thing you choose. Theoretically, like if you were to randomly choose. This is a 1 mana 1/3 that generates 0.66 cards. Honestly, that's pretty good. You're never going to, or you're probably going to lean towards choosing the best minion, because your opponent will probably pick the best minion, thinking that you picked the best minion because they want the best minion. But what if the meta becomes, well, obviously they wouldn't pick the best minion because they know that you're going to pick the best minion, so they'll pick the second best minion, and then becomes the best choice to pick the second best minion from the opponent. Of course, only the real big brains are going to choose the worst minion, but when you just pick the worst minion, I don't know if that card is good enough. One of the interesting ways that this works is the opponent will only get the choice at the beginning of their turn. So it's not something that interacts during your turn to fit like the Hearthstone game state of the opponent not doing anything while it's your turn. Which does mean that if Suspicious Usher suspiciously disappears or is silenced, so like if you kill off your own Usher, or if you silence your Usher, or you bounce your Usher, the opponent will not get a chance to guess a copy. Now, it's probably not worth the effort to getting rid of your Usher, but just saying that's a way that you could bypass the downside. Final card, we got Door of Shadows for Rogue, a 1-mana shadow spell, which says draw a spell, infuse 2, add a temporary copy of it to your hand. It's 1 mana, draw 2 cards, as long as you fulfill the infuse thing, and that's efficient when you can get it. Seems like a good value add for your deck. That does mean that Rogue is going to have to play some minions, and that's kind of cool. The infuse mechanic pushes decks to include minions in their decks, which naturally makes for a more interactive game. So that's the first look at Murder at Castle Nathria. It's a set theme that personally touches me extremely, in a high point. I really like the flavor of it. If you ever want to invite me to like a murder mystery party dinner, that sounds amazing. I'm sure that I'll be able to solve what happened at Castle Nathria. I hope there's a good like single player mission or like cool mode from this. I want to play a murder mystery game in Hearthstone. But yeah, looking forward to see what else is coming at Murder at Castle Nathria.